Words are very unnecessary. They can only do harm. Hey guys, messed up my hair a little bit. Hey guys, welcome to the vlog. Million here with you. MILLIAN, your ministry provocateur, iconoclast, firebrand, and resident heretic. Here at Dominion Farce, resident heretique. It is a pleasure to have you here. And in that intro, if you get the intro, if you understood what that was, 10 points. 50 points if you were actually there during the time when it happened. So I'll let you go research that out for yourself. But welcome to the vlog. And ironically, for doing a vlog on silence, I'm doing an awful lot of chatty. So let's talk silence if that's at all possible. So I get questions all the time from people on Facebook and through email and in ministry where they'll say something like, Million, I'm praying, God's not answering me. I'm not hearing anything. I'm worried. I'm scared. Does he hate me? And I'm like, okay, hold on. Hold the horses there, bucko. Listen up. The problem that I think we have is that in our culture, silence has a negative connotation. Now, what I mean by that is that if you give someone the silent treatment, what happens? It's not good, right? Or if something bad happens like a tragedy, we do a moment of silence. Or if, like in a military situation, if you lose somebody, you go into radio silence. Or if there's a performer on stage that does something totally outrageous or stupid, the whole audience goes silent. Or if that performer's on stage and misses a note or something, they stand there in silence like, what just happened here? Or on TV or radio, there's dead air. And if you've ever listened to radio and there's a host that pauses a lot, it'll drive you nuts because you're like, come on, man. Silence does an interesting thing to our ears. Well, filling in the dead air is something you'll see in waiting rooms or rooms full of people or dinner with friends even, where you'll see kind of people just say stuff just for the sake of saying it, or they'll drum their fingers to make some noise or sing, hum, or just do something to generate sound. And I think what happens is we get so afraid of what the dead air and what the silence might actually mean. And that space in between sort of freaks us out. But what you got to remember is God exists in that space in between. Believe it or not, that's where you're going to find him most often. Okay? Now, there's a place, it's in Minnesota. I want to say St. Cloud, but I could be wrong. Look it up for yourself, man. I ain't your mother. Anyway, it's called Orfield Laboratories, and it's something called an anechoic chamber. Now, it has a sound rating of minus 9.4 decibels A weighted. Now, if you're a sound nerd like I am, you know what that means, but let's just say it's super quiet in there, where you don't even hear reflections on the wall. If you speak, you don't hear like a room echo. After a while being in there, you actually hear your heart pumping. You hear like fluid moving around your body. It drives people nuts. Believe it or not, right? It actually is a 99% sound absorbent room, and it holds a Guinness record for being the quietest place in the world. And they say that nobody can stay in there more than 45 minutes because you literally start like hallucinating, and because there's no sound bouncing off walls, you can't get like a spatial feeling for where you are, like your equilibrium goes off. You start hallucinating, you start vomiting everywhere, and all kind of craziness happens. I would take a nap and just solve all that problem, but hey, whatever. But the founder of it is a guy named Steve Warfield, and he had an amazing quote about this concept, and what he said was, when it's quiet, ears will adapt. The quieter the room, the more things you hear. And I thought that was interesting because the quieter it is, the more you hear. Very interesting, right? So we're so afraid of dead air and silence. And you think, okay, maybe we have some thoughts or something on our conscience that we don't want to confront. So maybe if we keep talking, we don't have to face it. Or maybe we believe that running out of material to talk about means we're running out of life in some way. And if you notice, even with the Bible, there's a period, a 400-year period they call the silent years, where, oh, God's not talking, he must be pissed off at somebody, or there's nobody good enough, or whatever thing we try to rationalize that with, if you will. But I want you to remember, kind of look a little beyond the surface, okay? Because during that 400-year period, if you know your history, some interesting stuff was happening. During this time, groundwork was being laid out. In Persia, for instance, the Jewish people there were starting to get more freedoms and starting to be able to be more themselves and sort of flourish a little bit. With the Greeks, you had Alexander the Great moving in, setting up territories. Mattathias with the Maccabean revolt, you had people moving from multiple God belief, like the Roman mythology stuff, back to the belief of one God. There's stuff going on in the background. In Persia, for instance, you had a period where they started out with almost like an experimental society or country or whatever, where there was a lot of hope and there was a lot of great stuff happening. But over time, that hope started to die. There was, people, even though they were becoming more free, if you will, they were becoming more miserable. And they were becoming more and more anti-Jewish. In other words, the prevalent, dominant, religion that was going on at the time, people started really turning against it. And people during this period were, searching more and more for other gods, if you will, other ways to get their faith met. But, there's nothing new under the sun, right? Does that sound familiar, my fellow Americans? But let not your heart be troubled, because it always does come back to God. And that's what you see during the silent period. You start seeing things start working their way back from as far away as they got, right? Even in Rome, for instance, during this period, they're building infrastructure. They're building businesses. There's the Pax Romana. Wars are done right now because we've beaten everybody. Who else are we going to go fight? There's no one to go to war with. We won. They're building like roads and transportation and ways to get all over this magical big kingdom kind of thing they have going. There's a lot of cool stuff going on. Now, of course, I'm paraphrasing, a little bit of a literary license there, but you can understand what I'm getting at, okay? But it's just like modern day when we have technology and we have the social media. Do you know anybody that's using all this social media stuff to further the word of God? Oh, pick me. Yeah, it's me. This is why I do this, because the heathens built it, but I'm going to use it. Indeed, I am. So what I'm doing is I'm using this infrastructure period that we have where we're building technology where we can reach the entire world. 2 billion people here on YouTube. I want a piece of that pie. You know what I'm saying? And that's why we do stuff like this. We're using things that the heathens have built, and we're going to use it to spread the word. Word. So when you look at this whole period of history, it's not so much that it was really silent. But we assign that negative connotation to it, that, oh my goodness, God must be upset with us somehow. Daddy's in a good mood, I assure you. Now, speaking of Daddy, a lot of times in just everyday life, I go to lunch with my dad. Now, I've told you this story before, but now I really want to kind of break it down a little bit for you because it's pertinent to this topic. When I go out to lunch with my dad, we may be there hour, 90 minutes, 2 hours, depending where we go, right? We may actually say 5 sentences to each other the whole time. But it's not a bad thing. And we often sit in silence. Now, it used to confuse me because I'm like, is it something I said? But the truth is, it became clear to me, is that we already know each other. So we don't have to spend that time getting to know each other. We already know each other. And yeah, we talk about a couple updates on what's happening in life, but it's just a matter of being in the present. It's just a matter of enjoying that time together with no real expectation, with no agenda, with nothing that has to be done or we have to talk about. There's an element of just enjoying being there. And it's funny because I find myself now doing that with my son. We'll go out and grab a slice of pizza or something like that, and we'll just kind of be sitting there. He'll be staring off in the distance. I'll just kind of be sitting there going, But it doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. It's that intimacy between just people. In this case, it's father and son, but it applies to anything, and you see that all over the place. So that leads me into the next topic, which is something called comfortable silence. And this tends to be a determining factor in long-term relationships. It's that time where, when you know someone so well, you can practically complete their sentences. You know their moves, you know their tendencies, you kind of know what they're going to say in a situation. That's a key indicator of closeness and intimacy, right? And you see all the time, everybody wants intimacy with God. There's books written about it. There's conferences. Well, I'm going to save you some money. I'm going to tell you right now what you need to know. There is a need for silence. Okay? Words, as you heard in the intro, which I think I executed pretty well, words are not always necessary. You see, if you can find peace without speaking, you can be compatible with someone. Emotions conveyed in silence sometimes speak louder than words actually do. And if you've ever been to any of those like motivational conferences that they put out, not necessarily ministry, but just general conferences, they'll always talk about body language. And what they sort of estimate is that human communication is 7% actual spoken word. The rest is nonverbal stuff like expressions and body language and just kind of how you hold yourself when you're having a conversation or when you're doing something. Did you ever go to like a park somewhere and you look on a park bench and there's that old couple? You know they've been married for like 492 years. Like they were here when they were actually a couple when Columbus came over here. Like they actually were the people that Jesus built the cabinets for when he was a carpenter. That kind of old couple. You know the ones I'm talking about. And you see them sitting on the park bench and they're just kind of sitting there in silence for like hours. And you're like, is there like nothing to say? Or but that's exactly it. They're already in perfect communication with each other, despite the fact that they don't necessarily have to say anything. Okay, there's power in that, man. So, comfortable silence tends to be a sign of maturity in a relationship, and it's something that takes many years for that to come together. And the thing you want to remember, too, is that in any relationship, everybody needs a little bit of space. Okay, that's a normal thing. It's a healthy thing. And you have to remember that, just like in the love chapter in Corinthians, right? Love doesn't force itself on anyone. So there is a time where, yes, you talk and yes, you actually move forward with what you're doing. But there's other times where you just kind of defer and hang back and have a little space. And you can have that space with someone there, right? So unfortunately, in our culture today, we have a lot of busy couples and they don't ever get to see each other. And that's why when they get together, they're always talking and trying to catch up, and they don't get those good opportunities to spend time. And that's kind of unfortunate. And you see also unfortunate cases where there may be awkward silence between between couples, I should say. And when that happens, it's like, uh-oh, that either means discomfort, there's distrust somewhere, somebody might be hiding something, and we're going to try to get them off the topic of trying to figure it out. So let's keep talking and fill in the dead air, right? So there's a guy, his name is David Tyson Gentry, and he has this amazing quote which I came across, and it says, "True friendship comes when silence between two people is comfortable." Pretty cool. Now, who's David Tyson Gentry? No freaking idea, but it was a great quote, so I wanted to share it with you. But the question that I then ask in relation to that quote is, do you want to be a friend of God? Like Abraham, like Abe. Him and Abe, they hung out, they were buddies, they were bros, Do you want to be a friend of God? Well, what's that quote say about true friendship, right? So then, back to sort of the original premise is, what happens when God goes silent? Uh-oh. People say, oh, we're praying and praying. God's not talking to me. He doesn't want to talk to me. He's too busy. I'm not important. Did you ever think maybe God just wants to spend some time with you without having an agenda, without covering what's on the docket, without solving every single problem immediately for you? Did you ever think that maybe he just wants to hang out with you a little bit? And I'm going to tell you something else. And people don't always like this, but you're going to have to deal with this one. After all, he is God. He does get to do whatever he wants. Did you ever think that maybe there's time he doesn't feel like talking? I mean, he does have that right. I mean, everybody wants him. God, talk to me. God. I think the guy's, earned the right to enjoy a little silence himself, right? Maybe there's a time he doesn't necessarily feel like talking. Maybe it's not the right time for something. Maybe you're pressing him on something irrelevant to the situation that you're trying to solve. Maybe you're speaking to the wrong mountain. So basically what I'm getting at here is stop being afraid of the silence. It's not always a bad thing. And stop thinking that silence from God means angry or awkward or uncomfortable, because it's not always that either. Embrace the presence of him. Right? Maybe it's like in the silent years in your life. Maybe there's a period where he's laying groundwork in the background, and at that moment there's nothing to report. I'm not saying it's going to last 500 years, but maybe there's things that are in process that there's really nothing we need to discuss at the moment. It's already in motion. Just hang out and be cool for a minute. Okay? For someone who never leaves you, never forsakes you, and is one in spirit with you, you got to remember something. He always knows what's on your mind. You're not going to tell him anything that he doesn't already know, that he hasn't already heard in some form or other throughout eternity. And do you really think that he would, if he were truly upset with you for anything, that there wouldn't be something overtly said? Not that I think that's how he does it, but let's just kind of think that through for a second. Don't always treat it like it's a bad thing. And again, people always say, oh, I'm praying and praying, but God's not answering. Maybe he just wants to hang out. Maybe he just wants to sit with you. And God rests. Like, remember the seventh day, God rested? Maybe he just wants to take a break. The guy deserves a break. He does a lot, right? Maybe he just wants to rest with you. without any agenda, without the docket of things to do, and without that constant go, 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 go thing. My advice to you guys, enjoy the silence. Hit that thumbs up button because you know you love this video. Please subscribe because you know you want more of this stuff. Come on, right? And make sure you visit the website at dominionfire.com. Please share this everywhere on the socials because they're clamping down. They're starting to censor a lot of stuff. And unless you engage and do it, they're going to bury this down way at the bottom. And you know the world needs to hear this kind of stuff. So please help me out. Please share this, put it out there, click the bell notification, the whole 9 on this thing. And please come hang with us, please. Share your feedback if you spend your prayer time with silence instead of actually talking. Let me know what happens. Let me know if it works out for you. And if you get a good result, I'd love to hear it. So thanks for viewing. Thanks for being here. Boom goes Yeshua, and we'll see you next time.